It almost sounds like he's talking about somebody else. But he's talking about us. This is what we are when left to our own devices. I work, as you know, in a jail. I run a school in Rikers with about 40 teachers and a bunch of students. And I see men come in every day who have been subjected to extremity that I've never been subjected to. And as a result, they've taken extreme actions in their lives. They've done extreme things that I would not think that I could do, except I've never walked in their shoes. I've never been in the place that they've been. I've never been subjected to the conditions that they've been subjected to. And so every time I walk into that school and I look at them, I say, there go I, but for the grace of God. When we fail to instruct our hearts to do what is right, our hearts have a default mechanism, like a computer, that they fall back into. That's what Paul meant when he referred to the ruler of the kingdom of the air, namely the devil, as the spirit who is now at work in those who are disobedient. Then he said that this is how all of us lived at one time. We all lived disobediently, meaning lives that rejected God's commands. What do lives that reject God's commands look like? These are lives spent gratifying the cravings of our sinful nature and following its desires and thoughts. All Satan has to do is to bring us under his power, under his control, is to persuade us that we have the right to indulge thoughts and desires that ignore God's design for our lives. Reacting to a situation. Did you hear what he said? Who does he think he is? Does he think he's going to get away with that? Satan's biggest advantage is that what we see in front of us is people. Meanwhile, like the Wizard of Oz, he is operating behind the scenes. But we never see him for who he is. We see the faces of people around us, and we think we know them. We judge them by their actions, even though we judge ourselves by our intentions.
Wow.
That's like the dream sales job. I was in sales for many years in the health insurance industry. I mean, how awesome would it have been if all I had to do was to persuade my clients that it was okay for them to do what they already wanted to do. From the time that I walk into the office, they already want my product. All I have to do is say, it's okay. You can have this awesome product for yourself. And they sign on the dotted line. I mean, you could have retarded demons, very successful, because it doesn't take much. It's like my wife trying to persuade me to snuggle in the morning. This is not a very difficult thing for her to do. And though thankfully cuddling is not a sin, it's similar to what I'm describing, because anytime my wife wants to cuddle, she is appealing to something I already love to do. Sometimes I tell her, you really ought to charge me for this. And then she responds, you can't afford it. She's right. That's why James says that each one of us is tempted when by his own evil desire he is dragged away and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. What a great deal for Satan. All he has to do is get us to do what we already want to do. Thankfully, the grace of God that brings salvation teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age. So we can oftentimes find the power to restrain our reactions to the things happening around us. That's really ultimately what separates us from animals. I teach the guys in prison that in between what happens to us and how we react, there is a gap. And within that gap is something called self-awareness.
So when something happens, we have an ability that animals do not have to think about how we are thinking, to evaluate, to assess what we are feeling and desiring to do. Even though we want to do one thing really bad, we have the ability to detach from ourselves and say, are you nuts? Do you really want to do that? Yeah. See, we have the power to say no to ourselves. That is what denying ourselves, taking up our cross, and following Christ is all about. But although we have the power to say no, there's something deeper. There is the gold standard for saving. All of us have something that gives us a sense of validity. It's the thing that defines us. The thing that we cannot do without. It could be money for some of us. It could be career for others. It could be education for others. We validate ourselves by the excellent education that we have received and how much we know and how we can just expound on any topic with all of this lucidity. For some of us, it might be the way we look. Every time we walk by that mirror, we say, give me a high five. Dude, you got it, right? Or do that. It might be our stuff. You know, a lot of guys are into their stuff. You know, their toys. You know? I'm still waiting for my Harley, but my wife's kitchen has to come first. It's going to be a while before that happens. So some of us, mothers, it's our children. I mean, we take a bullet for that boy's heartbeat. And, or our family. And we serve God because we believe that He will help us to get it, to keep it, or help us to fix it. We don't realize it, but we've made God a means to an end. If we lose the thing that we thought God would give us, if He fails to give or to preserve or to fix the problem that we had entrusted to Him, we'll bear it. We'll discard our faith in Him quicker than you can say Mississippi. We are liable to fire Him for failing to do the job we hired Him for. As long as something else is the center of your joy, something apart from God that makes us complete, God is dispensable. And Satan has a hold on you. There's something that he can always appeal to that invokes the reaction that he wants, so that he could recover the control that he lost. Something that he can turn into a weapon against our relationship with Christ. This is why the next clause in that verse that we've been reading is so important. Jesus said, "But the world must learn that I love the Father, and that I do exactly what my Father has commanded me to do." See, the reason Satan had no hold on Jesus is because Jesus knew that there was nothing that he loved more than the Father. Nothing that could be taken away from him or never given to him that could alter his devotion to the Father. The Father is not a means to an end with Jesus. Serving and loving Him is an end in itself. His love for the Father was such that if He had nothing but the Father, He would be complete. He would be rich. That's why He was essentially saying by this verse, the world must know that my love for the Father is such that I will do without hesitation whatever He commands me to do, no matter what the cost. That's why Isaiah was able to speak prophetically about Jesus with these words. It was the Lord's will to crush Him and to cause Him to suffer. And then at the end of that verse, it says, and the will of God will prosper in His hand. God knew in advance this one thing about Jesus. He doesn't even consider equality with God a thing to be grasped. but would make nothing of himself, so long as he remains in fellowship with the Father. Therefore, God highly exalted him. The writer of Hebrews said the same thing when he wrote, although he was a son, he learned obedience from what he suffered. And once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him. Even for Jesus, he had to learn obedience from what he suffered. That was the pathway to arriving at the place where he would become the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him. This is why the first and greatest command, according to Jesus, is love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind. See, Jesus' desire for us is that the enemy would have nothing in us. Nothing he could use as a weapon against us. Nothing that could derail our progress in God. When we love God supremely, when we can say with the psalmist in Psalm 73, whom have I in heaven but you, and earth has nothing I desire besides you. That is when Satan is defeated. Does Satan have a hold on you? A button he can push? Every time your wife looks at you a certain way or says a certain thing, you are like, let's do it. Let's get it on. Come on! When they cut you off on the Jackie, Robinson Parkway, when people start pushing you around in the subway, what is it? What is your button? What is the thing that